Darn it, I forgot my bracelet. I am Suzanne Titkemeyer. If you don't know who I am, you wrote a column for a long time for Patheos called No Longer Quivering about the evangelical, non denominational quiverful movement. And all of those columns are still up at Patheos if you ever want to take a look. Link is in my description. Okay, what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit different because it's something I've been meaning to talk about for a very long time here that I've never gotten around to. Costa Rican crime. There aren't a lot of violent crimes that happen in Costa Rica. And let me just throw this out here. These are just my thoughts on the matter, opinions. And the why I'm saying that is there's been a lot of nonsense that has taken place surrounding this trial. I was fascinated with this before we ever moved to Costa Rica. I first encountered the Bender tale when I was here on vacation one year when CNN headline news is a strange thing here. I'm just going to throw that out there. It's where I first saw this. Where we are now, it's endless documentaries, and it was then too. Now, where we did live, it was just a mix of things, documentaries and actual news. But now it's just documentaries. And for a while, here in Costa Rica, they played the Bender documentary over and over and over and over again. I have the slightest connection to this, and I'll tell you about that in a bit, but it was just the craziest case. John Bender was a wealthy, I guess a billionaire. Let me see, because I pulled up. Oh, because I want to be very, very accurate about this. So I went back and reread, and the thing is, I've read a book on this case that's written by, of all crazy things, a woman who is a reporter for the Costa Rican Star. The book about the case was all in favor of Anne, but all I can say is after doing much reading, looking through trial, the trial transcripts and everything, I've come to a very different conclusion than the lady that wrote the book about this. John Bender and Anne, his wife, both had diagnosed mental disorders. I don't know if I think she had bipolar, but I think there were other things going on. Both of them had problems with depression. Both of them did. And my understanding is that John Bender came to Costa Rica with $600 million. He had worked in the American financial markets and had made all of his money that way. They're from Virginia, these two. And he married Anne at a very late date, like in his 30s. They weren't young when they married. She had been married before. I don't know if he had, but they married and they decided at some point to move to Costa Rica from the same reasons that many of us do, because you can have a better life here if you have money at all. You can have a much easier life here than in the States. There's just unparalleled natural beauty. There's animals everywhere. Those are a lot of the reasons a lot of Americans move to Costa Rica and become Costa Rican residents because of the incredible natural beauty of this place. I mean, we did the same thing, even though we knew early on that I was not going to be able to live anywhere near where these people were living. These people were living. Hey, Shelley, their home was near San Ysidro, General, I think is the name of the town. It is straight up the mountain from Dominical. Dominical is a little beach community there south of Manuel Antonio. So it's a beautiful beach community in like southern mid Costa Rica. So they were up the mountain. My understanding is that from certain parts of their estate, you could see the ocean, even though they were quite a ways inland. And there are a lot of places like that here. My husband, I've been trying to get him to look at the plot up the mountain from us because it has a mountain view, and I would not mind having a small little home up there for us and then renting this bad boy out. Getting a bigger home when you're older is just stupid. I'm just going to throw that out there. So these people had money, they had mental illness, they had guns, and they had all kinds of weird things in their house. They built this house that shows on the front of my video. It's a round house, completely 100% round. There were no walls. I find that a little odd because, like my house here, guess what I got? I got air conditioning. I got air conditioning. I need air conditioning and filtered air when my asthma's bad. So for me, that kind of living, as luxurious as it is, would not work. But I laughed when I saw some of the things they were collecting. They had one floor of that house that was nothing but Tiffany lamps, lamp after lamp after lamp of Tiffany lamps, and brought all kinds of jewels, cut and uncut, into Costa Rica. And they lived here quite a while. They had this huge property. They had this round house. They had no walls. They had their crazy things they collected. They had apparently head knockings with some of the locals, was my understanding, including they had people that had threatened them in some way, shape, or form. At least that's according to Ann. I don't know how true that is. I know how crazy Americans are here. I know how crazy American millionaires and billionaires are. They are muy loco. And to come here with $600 million is a pretty crazy thing altogether. He could have done so much good with that money besides what he did with it. So let me get the exact date because I don't have the exact date in front of me. His wife and he were sleeping one night, January 8th, 2010. It's quite a while ago, 12 years ago. They were sleeping. She awoke because she claimed she heard a gunshot. Her husband was in the bed dead next to her with a gunshot wound in the very back of his head. And the tale she told the Red Cross and the police when they finally showed up was that he had committed suicide. He killed himself. He'd taken the gun, his handgun he slept with. And why you have to sleep with a handgun, I don't know. We don't do that here. We have walls and we have motion detectors and alarms. I'm sure they have the same where they are, but still, I think that guns everywhere is kind of overkill for a lot of people. Only shoot their feet off, or they do like this. So Ann claimed that he took the pistol and somehow got it all the way to the back of his head and shot himself at such an angle it would have been impossible for him to have used to kill himself. I dispute that he killed himself. So did the government of Costa Rica. They charge Ann Bender with committing the crime. Now, here's where it gets sticky and messy. One thing I do know about Costa Rica is that corruption in the police and just in general is one of the worst things around here. I've told the tale of the time I got pulled over for the cop that said I was speeding and he wanted my passport. And I said, how do you know it's speeding? You don't have a radar gun or anything. And he just started doing the gringo shuffle about he wanted money. And I just said, nope, and drove off. So, and I know friends who've done that too, because they will try to shake you down sometimes. And I'm not just talking about the police. The gringo shuffle is real. If they think you are a wealthy gringo, there are some people here are corrupt enough to try and shake you down for money. Not everybody, and you run across them rarely unless you're in a tourist town. If you're in a tourist town, they're everywhere. So they weren't actually in a tourist town, but they were in a tourist district. I'm just going to throw that out there and say that's what it was. So being in this place where there is some corruption and there is some chicanery going on, some shenanigans, which is why I labeled this one as part of the shenanigans series. They seized everything in the house. They seized the Sub-Zero fruit, 2 refrigerators. They just seized everything. And you guys that know me talking about my adventures with having my personal items brought in, my household goods, how I lost 2/3 of them to the Costa Rican government because the person I hired to pack screwed it all up and did not list everything on the list. I'd given the aduana and I'd given my shipping company, the list of things that were going to be in the shipment. This guy put everything but the kitchen sink in the shipment. So therefore, 2/3 of it ended up going. And it was stupid stuff. Like they took my desk, my solid oak desk that did along 2 walls. It was huge. They took it. And they gave me one of the drawers, one of the 9 drawers in it. So it was that sort of thing. So going back to this, so they started packing up everything in the Bender home for safekeeping, and Anne still doesn't have it. So while the police were running these things, and supposedly there were a lot of people who were trampling through the crime scene. And I'm no detective, but I can tell you, if you have oodles of people running through a crime scene, the evidence is going to get very, very degraded. And I think that may have been what happened here, from what I could tell from what everybody's saying. It looks like the police did drop the forensic ball, because when they did the gunshot residue test on the hands of Anne and John, it's my understanding that the Costa Rican reports show there was no gunshot residue on his hands. Oh my goodness, a mop just showed up. Oh my goodness, 10 feet away. Oh, they're lovely little birds. They're turquoise. They have a little tail. It comes down that has like a racket on the end of it. So I'm going to try to tell this tale while I'm looking at the mop who's stealing berries off of my bush here. So my understanding is that the evidence clears John and having committed suicide, and it commits her. They also found the most vague suicide note, I believe. It was actually an email from John to Anne about disappointments, because they had come to Costa Rica. It had been a dream of theirs, dream vacations here in the past, and they just loved it here for reasons other than Mott-Mott's. Mr. Mott-Mott is flown away. But thank you to the universe for showing me that. Their Pura Vida had turned sour. They had, when your Pura Vida goes bad, this is traditionally why, I'm sorry, people who are here Americans, I don't know the exact percentages, but I would guess it's as much as 70 or 80% go home after 2 years. They find they can't adjust to the culture. They can't deal with the with Tico time, that difficult thing. And they can't deal with not having shopping nearby. They can't deal with so many things. They can't deal with the fact that it is not the United States. And they go home, and that's fine. If you can't deal with the culture, go home. These people ran into the typical problems that all of us that move here run into, and it triggered their depression. They both became more and more depressed, stopped eating. Various sundry things happened, and John ended up dead, whether by her hand or his own hand. Nobody really knows 100% for sure. The evidence I saw seemed to indicate that she may have killed him. The Costa Rican authorities thought so. So they put Anne on trial, okay? They put her on trial, 3 different trials. Because unlike the United States, when you're tried and you're found guilty, you can have an appeal, and the judge can decide yes or no, that's your sentence. You just served out. And if they decide that you're 100% innocent after you've gone through trial, then the courts cannot retry you in the United States. Here, it's a totally different ballgame. So Anne has been tried a grand total of 3 times. The first time she was found guilty. And she has been found innocent in the other trials. Costa Rica wants to retry her because they don't have a statute of limitations or a law that says they can't keep retrying you. they can keep retrying you until they get the answer they want. And that's why I always tell people, keep your nose clean. Don't commit any real crime here, because they can really do you dirty if you do. They have that ability. And Anne is already back in the States, so there's some question about whether they're ever going to be able to call her back for a fourth trial from the United States. I kind of hope that they do. I've read the book that this lady has written. Let me give you her name. She is a reporter for the Costa Rican Star, and that is Carol Vaughn, spelled the normal ways. Carol wrote a book about the entire thing, but she's sympathetic to Ann Bender, and it was an Ann Bender apologia as far as I'm concerned. And they want Ann back here for the trial. What happened immediately after the killings is Ann's attorney put her in a mental hospital in San Jose, which is the capital city here. Maybe from San Ysidro General, I think it would be maybe an hour and 20 minutes. It's not too far from where I was living in Copiague. They put her in the mental hospital. They tried her. They sent her to jail for a while. Her lawyer got an appeal. They've retried her a bunch of times. Finally, she fled to the States. Right now, she's got a lawsuit going against the government of Costa Rica because her things have disappeared. And one of the things that disappeared the hardest, that I've read so many different figures on, is her jewels. At the time of all of this, all of the news reports said that she had $3 million in loose stones. If you bring anything to Costa Rica that is investment, be it money, investment jewelry, investment bonds or whatever, and you do not let the customs know you're bringing this stuff in, and it's not your personal possession, it is an investment thing, you have to let them know if it's $10,000 or greater so that you can pay the aduana on it. And did not do that. So, of course, they seized the jewels, because they weren't properly imported into Costa Rica. They weren't properly paid for. Now she's conflated the value to 16 million, and that's what she wants and is suing for. When the crime happened, it was interesting because they kept finding loose jewels everywhere, all over the crime scene, stuffed in backpacks, laying around loose, or all over the house. So the Costa Rican government officials loaded luggage and just hauled them out and hauled them to San Jose. Now they've returned them to her, less the $1.3 million fine to Costa Rica for the back taxes, the aduana on the jewels. What they returned to her was only worth $4,000. So that's what I meant when I said this is a fascinating crime where there's all kinds of craziness going on. She may have killed him. She may not have killed him. She had all kinds of things in the house that were clearly investments, like these jewels that the government seized. And then you had people seizing things like the 2 Sub-Zero freezers, which, like I said, that's kind of almost par for the course here with the enormous amounts of corruption. You just don't give anybody those opportunities to do those things. I really started to become quite interested in this case when we were buying this house. Before we got our contract on this house, one of the things that we did was our realtor said, hey, I know you want that house in that subdivision, the gated one with the guest house. I know you want that one very badly. And this is after looking at 10 different houses. We looked at 10 and said, we want that one. But the problem was this one had a contract on it already that had to fall out. It took a couple of weeks to fall out before we could put in a contract and buy it. So the realtor said, let's look at all these properties. So we looked at a bunch and we rated them based on acceptability. And I have less harsh standards than my husband, and I would have been happy, maybe even happier with a couple of the other properties that I could not talk him into looking at. Okay. Again, that I could not talk him into considering. One with being a townhouse where you could see the ocean from the house, and it was a 2-minute walk down the street to the ocean. This one really fit us the best. So the real estate agent said, "Look, let's look at some other stuff. Let's look at some property." So somebody had finally released the Bender property for sale, and they weren't selling it as a whole. Apparently, they tried to sell it as a whole, and it didn't sell, is my understanding. So what they did was they seized this beautiful property and they chopped that up into lots for luxury homes, for gringo houses. So we went down there and we looked at the property, and it was absolutely breathtaking. You could see waterfalls from almost every lot, and a couple of lots you could see the ocean quite clearly. It would have been a primo property, except it would have put us 30 minutes up the road from the beach. And if we wanted that, we could have bought the Italian villa overlooking the Pacific, because it would have put us about a 30-minute drive down, well, more like a 15-minute drive down to the beach. And we really wanted quicker beach access than that. We're 10 minutes away from 10 beaches. So there's that. But it was the most spectacular thing I'd ever seen. But I can see why Anne doesn't want to live there anymore, particularly with this giant trial looming over her head. Now, after John died, she married another man and lived in San Jose for a long time with him, but he has long since passed as well. I'm going to be doing some research into the whereabouts of Anne now and see what's going on with that. Because like I said, looking around, doing a little digging before I came on to talk about this case that has long fascinated me, all I could find out is she was trying to get her jewels back from the Costa Rican government. And suddenly the value of the jewels had skyrocketed from what they were supposedly worth in 2010. Let this be a lesson to you. Do not violate importation laws when you move overseas, because it will bite you in the rear eventually, every time. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. This has been a bad asthma day for me, so I'm going to go lay down. But I just wanted to rant about that a little bit, and just rant about some of the things I've seen go down here. It's a great place to live if you live within the laws. Oh, I got to talk about this a little bit before I go. You do not want to end up in the jail here. Why? Because the jail is very different here than it is the United States. One of the things that's very different about it is very crude. Now, I'm not saying the penitentiaries and the other correctional facilities in the States are luxurious, far from it. But I do know that they have basic accommodations. Some of them even have air conditioning. Not all of them are like Joe Arpaio's jail. I think that the ones here, from everything I'm seeing and hearing, have more in common with Joe Arpaio's tent city than they do with actual jails. You have to have family on the outside that's providing all your clothing, because there's no uniforms whatsoever. So whatever clothing you have is what clothing you have, or what your family brings you. There's no buying anything like that here. There's also, they provide you beans and rice and water. So for any additional protein or fruits and vegetables, the things that we all need to stay well, your family has to provide that. So in the Costa Rican prison system, it's extremely crude, and you better provide your own food and your own clothing. So for Ann Bender to have been in one of those places for a while, and she would have been a huge shock if you're used to being married to some zillionaire who made a killing in the New York Stock Exchange. It would have been a huge shock, and it would have been a huge shock for anybody. We have Costa Rican buddies who've ended up in prison here who called us because the only thing holding them in prison is the inability to pay some small fine. They'll throw you in jail here for not paying your fines. Sorry, losing my voice. I had to have a drink. So don't commit crimes here. Make sure you pay your aduana. Make sure that your import, everything is paid for. And other than that, there's not too much you really have to look out for. It's a great place to live. Most Americans figure out eventually that you could have pretty much anything delivered here by using Liberty Express. Or you have people mule things for you back and forth. I have people do that for me all the time. I'm getting ready to have a family member come visit, and I'm going to ask her, I'm going to load her down. I'm going to send her a bunch of crap that I need, and it's mostly arts and crafts related for her to bring in for me because it would make my life here a lot more pleasant. Not that it isn't pleasant already, because it is. And I'm going to spend the day, like I said, after I take my little nap, I'm going to go in there and sew. My sewing machine's all set up, everything's ready to go. So, you guys have a wonderful day. And I'd like some feedback if you guys would like any true crime stuff, because that's something I've always been kind of fascinated with. There's not a lot of true crime I can do here except for this. And the guy who ended up with his family claiming on Fox News that somebody had kidnapped him. Those are the only really true crime that I know of in this area and out in Costa Rica that I think are pretty interesting. Okay, you guys, I'll see you tomorrow or the next day.